Voyage to go, history. Life is a journey, being part of it is everything. Hello, my name is Jessica. Welcome to episode 9 of my historical travel podcast, Voyage to go, history, where I take you on the most adventurous journeys from the past that continue to shape our view of the world today. In this true story, 17-year-old German Georg Forster travels around the world with his father, a naturalist in the 18th century, aboard a sailing ship under the command of James Cook. Georg's travel narrative is written in the language of the 18th century. To make it more understandable, I have largely translated it into modern language. His knowledge is that of the late 18th century, so I will place some of his statements in context and provide additional information. What happened in the last episode?
In the previous episode, the Resolution and Adventure continued their perilous journey through the icy expanse of the Southern Ocean. The crew encountered massive icebergs, one of which was estimated to hold 45.7 million cubic meters of ice. Despite the harsh conditions, freezing temperatures, fog, and snow, they pressed on, their path frequently obstructed by thick pack ice. The voyage brought moments of awe and danger. Mistaking clouds for land, the crew's hopes of discovering new territory near Cape Circumcision were dashed. Wildlife offered some relief, with penguins, petrels, and albatrosses becoming subjects of study and sustenance. A captured penguin revealed remarkable adaptations to the cold, while observations of blue petrels demonstrated nature's ingenuity in equipping creatures for survival in such unforgiving climates. Life on board was grueling, with constant cold, salted provisions, and damp conditions testing their endurance. Preventative measures like bouillon cakes and sauerkraut kept most of the crew free from scurvy. One carpenter, George Jackson, was successfully treated with malt infusion, underscoring its value on long voyages. As they navigated through treacherous ice fields and endured unrelenting weather, the crew's resilience and the ingenuity of their provisions were key to their survival in one of the harshest environments on Earth.
Friday, January 1st, 1773, Southern Ocean.
The new year began with snow and fresh, cold storms. These drove them westward, pushing them as far as the meridian where Bouvet supposedly discovered Cape Circumcision was believed to be located. In this region, seals and penguins reappeared, reigniting hope among several in their party that land might be sighted. They diligently searched the horizon. However, after sailing a considerable distance in this direction, their expectations were bitterly disappointed. The presumed signs of land once again lost some of their previous credibility. As they had already sailed westward beyond the meridian of Bouvet's discovery, and with the wind shifting to the northwest during the night, they adjusted their course back toward the east. Upon returning to the location where they had encountered extensive ice fields on December 31st, they found the ice had drifted away. They resumed their southeastward course. On the morning of the 9th, a large ice island surrounded by many fragments came into view. With the weather calm, they halted the ship and launched a boat to collect as much loose ice as possible. The collected ice chunks were brought aboard and placed on the ship's aft deck, where they were broken into smaller pieces and packed into barrels. Later, some of the ice was melted in kettles, and the resulting warm water was poured over the remaining ice in the barrels to expedite the melting process. In this manner, they managed to secure a 30-day supply of fresh water, while in the open sea, under the desolate southern skies, at a latitude of 61 degrees 36 minutes south. Captain Cook's published account of this voyage includes an illustration of these ice islands, showing the ship and boats engaged in collecting the ice. 2 days later, they spotted several large whales, estimated to be around 18 meters or 60 feet in length, along with many penguins drifting on small ice floes. They had another opportunity to collect ice, and despite the cold and the harshness of the seawater, which left their hands raw, the crew undertook the labor with cheerful determination. The water obtained from the melted ice was completely fresh and tasted purer than the water they still had from the Cape. The only drawback was that it had lost its fixed air during freezing. Consequently, many of them developed swollen glands in their necks from drinking it. This characteristic of snow or ice water explains why people living in mountainous regions, where such water is often the only source, commonly develop large goiters. Interestingly, these populations reportedly regard such features as a mark of beauty, distinguishing them from other nations. Some crew members who lacked knowledge of natural science genuinely feared that the barrels containing ice would burst once the ice melted. They didn't realize that ice, since it floats on water, occupies more space than water in its liquid form. To prove this, the captain ordered a container filled with small ice pieces to be placed in a warm cabin. As the ice melted, it took up significantly less space. Clear demonstration outweighed logical arguments, as reasoning rarely convinced sailors. On the morning of the 17th, they crossed the Antarctic Circle and entered the truly frigid zone of the southern hemisphere, which had remained unexplored by all previous seafarers. A few days earlier, they had encountered a new species of petrels, brown with white undersides and a large white patch on their wings. As these birds appeared native to the region, often seen in groups of 20 or 30, they were named Antarctic petrels. Despite their interest, efforts to capture and examine these birds failed, as none fell close enough to the ship to be retrieved. By 5 p.m., they counted over 30 large icebergs ahead and noticed a bright white glow on the horizon, signaling even more ice. Shortly after, the ships entered a vast area of broken ice. The pieces were porous, spongy, and dirty, eventually accumulating to the point that the ocean's waves were stilled, making the sea appear entirely flat, despite the still strong wind. Beyond this broken ice, an immense, unbroken ice field stretched southward, as far as the mast's vantage point could see. At this point, with the ships having reached 67 degrees 15 minutes south, Captain Cook ordered both vessels to turn around and head northeast. On this southern journey, they had found no land, but had frequently encountered whales, snow petrels, gray petrels, and Antarctic petrels. On the 19th and 20th, they saw a bird that one of their companions, who had been to the Falkland Islands, called Port Egmont's hen. It was actually the great northern skua, or Larus cataractes, commonly found in higher latitudes near both poles. This bird was considered a sign of nearby land, but the crew had been so often disappointed by such supposed indications that they began to place little faith in them. On the 27th, alongside numerous species of petrels and albatrosses, they spotted another skua. It soared high above the ship, tilting its head from side to side, as if observing them intently. This behavior was new to them, since all other seabirds of this region stayed near the water's surface. The following evening, on the 29th, several porpoises swam alongside them, darting back and forth with incredible speed. These creatures moved at least 3 times faster than the ship, despite the vessel making good progress at 8.5 nautical miles, or 15.7 kilometers per hour. The porpoises had striking black and white markings, with a large white patch on their sides that extended almost to the top of their dorsal fins. In the afternoon, they spotted a small black and white bird. Some thought it might be a type of kingfisher, while others identified it as a murre, a bird rarely seen far from land. However, they couldn't get close enough to observe it clearly, leaving room for doubt that it might have been another type of petrel. Still, they noticed another less ambiguous sign suggesting nearby land. The sea was remarkably calm and flat, even with the fresh wind. Since they had also learned at the Cape of Good Hope that land had been discovered in this region by 2 French naval captains, Messrs. de Kerguelen and de Saint-Aloirn, in January 1772, they prudently hove to for the rest of that night and the following one. As no detailed reports of the expedition of these gentlemen had been officially published in France, Georg shared information he had gathered from some French officers at the Cape. Captain de Kerguelen, a lieutenant in the French Navy, commanded the ship Fortune, and was accompanied by a smaller vessel, Le Gros Ventre, under the command of Captain de Saint-Aloirn. Both ships had set sail from Ile-de-France, or Mauritius, at the end of 1771. On January 13, 1772, Captain de Saint-Aloirn spotted 2 islands and named them the Isles of Fortune. The next morning he discovered another island, which he called Round Island, or Ile Ronde, due to its circular shape. Around the same time, Captain de Kerguelen sighted land that appeared to be extensive and mountainous. He sent one of his officers ahead in a 6-oared boat to sound the waters. However, due to strong winds, Captain de Saint-Aloirn reached the shore before Kerguelen's boat. Saint-Aloirn discovered a bay, which he named Gros Ventre Bay after his ship. Once anchored, he dispatched a crew in a jolly boat to land. Battling high waves, the men reached the shore, planted the French flag, and formally claimed the land for France. After completing their task, they returned to Le Gros Ventre, soon joined by the crew of Kerguelen's boat. Meanwhile, the Fortune had been blown at least 60 nautical miles, or 111 kilometers, from the coast due to a storm that its weak masts could not withstand. Captain de Kerguelen decided to sail directly back to Ile-de-France. Captain de Saint-Aloirn, unaware of Kerguelen's decision, searched for his companion at sea for 3 days. When he failed to locate him, Saint-Aloirn continued surveying the region and mapping the coastline. During this effort, a storm caused him to lose the Fortune's boat, which had been fastened to his ship. When Captain de Saint-Aloirn rounded the northern end of the island, he found that the coast extended southeastward. After sailing along this side for approximately 20 English nautical miles, or 37 kilometers, he observed that the land was mountainous, inaccessible, and entirely devoid of trees. He then set his course toward New Holland, now known as Australia, and eventually reached Ile-de-France, or Mauritius, via Timor and Batavia. However, he died shortly after his arrival. Upon Captain de Kerguelen's return to Europe, he was promptly sent out again, this time commanding a 64-gun ship named Roland and accompanied by a frigate, L'Oiseau, captained by Ronevet. During this second expedition, he made no new discoveries. He barely caught sight of the land discovered on the previous voyage before circumstances forced him to turn around and return. The northern coast of the land discovered by Kerguelen lies at 48 degrees southern latitude and approximately 82 degrees east longitude from Faro. This location is 6 degrees east of Ile-de-France, or Mauritius, and about 64 degrees 20 minutes east of Greenwich. In January 1772, Captain Marion, commissioned by the French government as leader of the ships Le Mascarin, commanded by Captain Crozet, and Le Castries, led by Captain Klesmer, made several discoveries during an expedition. They found small islands at 3 separate locations, at 46.5 and 47.5 degrees southern latitude, and 37, 46.5, and 48.5 degrees east longitude from Greenwich. These islands were all of minor size, high, rocky, devoid of trees, and nearly barren. From there, the ship sailed to the southern end of New Holland, also known as Van Diemen's Land, first discovered by Tasman, and then proceeded to the Bay of Islands in New Zealand. Here, Captain Marion suffered the misfortune of being killed alongside 28 of his crew by the local inhabitants. Following this loss, command passed to Captain Crozet. He continued the voyage through the western part of the South Sea to the Philippine Islands, and eventually returned to Ile-de-France, or Mauritius. According to these accounts, the discoveries made by the French sailors were included in the excellent chart of the Southern Hemisphere, drawn under the supervision of the Duke of Croy by Valgondy, and published at the beginning of 1773. In the evening, when they were near the 50th degree of southern latitude, they passed a large iceberg. As they sailed by, it shattered into pieces with a loud crash. The next morning, a large mass of seaweed drifted past the ship. In the afternoon, Captain Furneaux, aboard the Adventure, signaled that he had passed a significant patch of floating seaweed and observed many diving birds resembling those in English waters. Uncertain whether these signs indicated nearby land, they heaved to for the night and resumed sailing eastward at daybreak. Along the way, they were accompanied by various bird species, particularly black shearwaters. Some seaweed appeared again, as well as a lone tern, a seabird with a forked tail, commonly called the egg bird by sailors. At noon, they found themselves at 48 degrees 36 minutes southern latitude, roughly the position of the French discoveries. In hopes of locating these, they adjusted their course to south-southwest. However, the next day brought strong winds, forcing them to take down the topsails and sail through the night under the main lower sails alone. By midday, after continuing in this direction without sighting land, they changed course to northwest to resume their search. On this heading, they reached 48 degrees southern latitude and approximately 60 degrees east of Greenwich on February 6th, still finding no land. They abandoned further search efforts in this area and resumed their primary mission, sailing southeast. Despite strong easterly winds, the sea remained calm. This led them to believe that land lay to the east, a notion later supported by the map published by Vaughandy. According to the map, on February 2nd, they had been just 2 degrees of longitude west of the supposed French discoveries. While they did not find the land itself, their detailed navigation through the region clarified the geography. It confirmed that the French discovery was merely a small island, and not, as initially believed, the northern end of a vast southern continent.
Friday, January 8, 1773, Southern Ocean.
In the morning, a dense fog descended upon them, obscuring their view of the adventure, their companionship. They lost sight of it entirely. In response, the captain ordered cannon fire every half hour throughout the day, later reducing it to hourly intervals. However, no answer came, and even the signal fires they kept alight during the following 2 nights proved ineffective. By the morning of the 10th, all attempts to reconnect with the adventure had failed. They reluctantly faced the grim necessity of continuing southward alone, exposing themselves once again to the perils of the frigid polar seas. Now, without the hope of assistance or rescue from their companions, should their own ship meet disaster, their situation felt more precarious. The crew felt this deeply. Rarely did a sailor glance out to the vast ocean without expressing sorrow over their separation from the adventure. They lamented having to traverse the uncharted, immeasurable expanse of the southern seas alone. The sight of their steadfast companion had previously bolstered their morale and made the hardships of the journey more bearable. Penguins, small diving petrels, and a particular species of divers, or colymbi, only deepened their unease. These birds led them to the disheartening thought that, while they were battling ice and storms, the adventure might have found land nearby. According to Vaughandy's chart, they must have been only slightly south of such a location at the time.
Sunday, January 17, 1773, Southern Ocean.
Around the 58th degree of southern latitude, they gathered numerous ice floes and replenished their water barrels with them. A variety of storm petrels and albatrosses consistently accompanied the ship, along with occasional sightings of large northern skuas, known as Port Egmont hens by the crew. They also spotted penguins, seals, and whales from time to time. During the previous night, they observed a fascinating phenomenon, which reappeared that night and on several subsequent nights. It consisted of long columns of bright white light rising from the eastern horizon, almost to the zenith, gradually spreading across the southern sky. Occasionally, the upper ends of the columns bent sideways. These southern lights, or Aurora Australis, bore some resemblance to the northern lights of the other hemisphere, but differed in that they were exclusively white, lacking the fiery or purple hues often seen in the north. At times, the light was so intense that it obscured the stars beneath it. At others, the stars were faintly visible through the glow. This phenomenon usually occurred under clear skies, and the air was sharp and cold, with the thermometer often hovering at freezing.
The Aurora Australis, or Southern Lights, is a natural light display caused by interactions between the Earth's magnetic field and charged particles from the Sun. When solar wind reaches Earth, these particles are guided by the planet's magnetic field towards the poles, where they collide with atmospheric gases. This excites oxygen and nitrogen molecules, producing glowing colors, typically green, red, and purple. Aurora Australis occurs around the South Pole, while its northern counterpart, the Aurora Borealis, appears in the Arctic. Both phenomena are created by the same process, but due to differences in magnetic field strength and atmospheric conditions, variations in color and intensity can sometimes occur. The southern lights are less frequently observed, as they are mainly visible from Antarctica, southern New Zealand, and parts of Australia. This concludes part 9 of Georg Forster's journey around the world aboard the HMS Resolution under the command of James Cook. I have linked a map of the locations of this episode in the show notes. For those who would like to see the locations of the journey around the world on the present day, I recommend my YouTube channel, Voyage to Go. There, I visit the places from Georg Forster's travel narrative and try to uncover traces and connections between today and the past. So that was episode 9 of our journey around the world with Georg Forster, Captain Cook and the HMS Resolution, on which we will continue our travels together in the coming weeks. I hope we can travel a little further together, because life is a journey, being part of it is everything.